"Move him aside," the lieutenant barked, stepping past the trembling recruits in the hallway. The old man in the faded coat didn't lift his head. He simply kept sweeping the floor, steady and unbothered. A pair of sergeants snickered as they passed him. "Hard to believe someone raised a trainee as sharp as Torres. Your father's just a poor old man, kid." The recruit froze mid-step. The old man finally paused, leaning on the broom. For a heartbeat, the corridor fell into a strange, suspended quiet, like everyone sensed something they couldn't name. Then he spoke, calm as steel cooled in water. "Stand at attention when you speak of a commander." Every soldier in the hallway stiffened. Silence swallowed the room whole. "Where are you watching this story from today? And what branch means the most to you?" The buses rolled in before sunrise, engines ticking in the cold like they were holding their breath. Recruits stepped off one by one, silhouettes against the floodlights, each trying to look steadier than they felt. That's how it always was on day one. Faces blank, jaws set, hearts running faster than boots could keep up. Among them was Torres, quiet, squared away, the kind of kid who didn't need to tell you he wanted this. You could see it in the way he adjusted the straps on his ruck, checking each buckle like he'd done it 1,000 times alone. The instructors watched from the platform, arms folded, reading posture the way older men read maps. They spoke in low tones, calling out numbers, names, backgrounds, anything that might give them leverage. But when they got to Torres, the sheet was almost empty. No notes, no remarks. Just a line that said "family unknown," which wasn't entirely true, but close enough for what the boy wanted. He didn't mention his father, not to the instructors, not to the recruits, not to the walls themselves. Some men hide secrets because they're ashamed. Torres hid his because he respected them, and because the truth carried weight, far more weight than a 19-year-old needed strapped to his shoulders on day one. A whistle broke the silence, the formation tightened, and the platoon began its first march toward the barracks. Gravel shifted under boots, a steady, synchronized crunch. Over the sound, Torres could hear the distant hum of generators powering the base, the faint metallic ringing of a gate closing. Small details he absorbed without effort. Old habits, inherited ones, even if he didn't know it. Inside the barracks, the air smelled of disinfectant, old steel bunks, and fresh nerves. Recruits moved with stiff movements, trying not to look new. A sergeant paced the aisle, tapping a clipboard against his thigh, pausing every so often to correct a sloppy locker or call out a recruit for hesitation. When he reached Torres, he stopped. "Name?" "Torres, Sergeant." "Where you from, Torres?" "South Ridge, small town." "Your father work?" "Yes, Sergeant." "What does he do?" Torres's answer landed light, like it had no meaning at all. "Maintenance, on base." The sergeant smirked. "So, he's the reason you got in here?" "No, Sergeant." The reply was quiet but firm. The sergeant didn't like that tone. Calm, unyielding. Men that age weren't supposed to sound like that. He moved on, but the seed was planted, and in a place like this, seeds grew fast. By noon, the rumor had already started. It floated between bunks, across the obstacle yard, around mess hall tables. Torres's father is the old janitor. Poor guy. Probably mops the floor where his son sleeps. It wasn't cruel at first, just careless. Recruits talk the way young soldiers do when they haven't yet learned that words can break things harder than rifles. The truth of it was simple enough. Elias, the old man, did work as a janitor on base. Most days you could find him moving quietly through the hangars or the administrative wing, pushing a cart with a mop and a rag folded neatly on top. He wore the same faded coat year-round, sleeves rolled halfway, collar frayed. No one asked about him. No one offered more than a nod. The young soldiers barely saw him. He drifted like background noise, steady and unimportant. But if anyone ever looked closely, really looked, they'd notice something that didn't fit. The way he walked, heels soft, toes pointed, conserving motion like a man used to carrying weight. the way his eyes tracked exits without thinking, how he stood straighter when jets powered up on the runway, not out of awe, but recognition. Some habits don't retire, no matter how many coats you hang over them. Elias swept the hallway outside the barracks while the recruits took their written assessments. Dust gathered in the corner of the broom. His hands moved with practiced patience. Now and then, instructors passed him, discussing scores or training rotations. None of them noticed how he adjusted his stance when they spoke about strategy. None of them caught the flash in his eye when they misread a situation. He kept all of that tucked deep beneath the quiet life he chose. Inside the classroom, Torres took his exam with the same quiet focus. He didn't finish first, but he didn't need to. He finished steady, accurate, measured, controlled. When the sergeant collected the papers, he gave Torres a look. Not respect, not yet. More like suspicion. By evening, physical drills began. The instructors pushed hard, harder on Torres than on the others. They sensed something in him, something he wasn't showing. Talent that felt restrained. And restraint irritated instructors more than weakness. Weakness they could fix. Restraint made them wonder who you were protecting. On the second day, word reached Torres directly. A recruit approached him during chow time, tray in hand. "Hey, is it true?" he asked. Torres didn't look up. "Is what true?" "That your dad is the janitor, the old guy with the mop." Torres set his fork down. "He works maintenance, that's all." "So, yes?" "Eat your food," Torres said quietly. The recruit walked off, half amused, half unsure. Torres returned to his tray, jaw tight. Not angry, just disappointed. He didn't care what they thought of him, but they spoke about his father without knowing the first thing about the man. Later that night, after lights out, Torres lay awake listening to the steady hum of the ventilation system, the soft snores of exhausted bodies. He tried not to let the words sink in, but they had a way of slipping past armor when the room went dark. The next morning, the whispers grew louder. As Torres performed sit-ups during PT, he caught phrases floating through the air. "Poor old man. Must be rough. Probably smells like bleach." Nobody said them to his face. Not yet. But the tone carried arrogance, the kind that comes from ignorance, not malice. Elias heard some of it as he swept near the training field. He didn't react, didn't pause, didn't even look up, but his grip tightened on the broom handle. Just once, just enough to make the wood creak. He had learned long ago how to let noise pass through him. Soldiers speak, armies speak, the world speaks. Only a disciplined man chooses which words to keep. That afternoon, the instructors put Torres through a tactical confidence course. Crawling under wire, scaling walls, simulated room clearing. He handled each obstacle with quiet efficiency, never slowing, never boasting. But the instructors noticed something. He wasn't pushing. He was performing safely, not aggressively. Controlled, not bold. When he finished, Captain Reeves, the ranking officer overseeing the program, stepped forward. "Torres," he said, "you've got skill, but you're holding back. Why?" "No excuse, sir," Torres replied. "Your father teach you that?" Reeves asked, voice dipping just enough to imply judgment. Torres didn't take the bait. "My father taught me to earn my place." Reeves smirked. "Well, he didn't earn much, did he?" The platoon went silent. Torres's breath stayed even. He answered with nothing but his posture. Straight, steady, unbroken. Reeves walked away, satisfied. The recruits exchanged looks, suddenly unsure whether the joke had landed wrong. But words once spoken echo long after their sender forgets them. That evening, Elias swept the walkway near the training yard as Reeves passed by. The captain didn't acknowledge him, didn't slow, didn't see the recognition in Elias's eyes, a recognition built not on status, but on the weight of watching your son be tested. Elias returned to his duties without a word. He was used to blending in. It was safer that way. Safer for everyone. But even the quietest men feel the edges of pressure when it builds around the ones they love. The next day, during a weapons safety orientation, Torres performed every check flawlessly. Instructors exchanged glances. This wasn't luck or talent. This was training, real training, passed down by someone who understood precision. Recruits began to wonder who exactly had taught him, yet rumors still dragged back to the same narrative. The janitor father, the poor old man. And each time the words echoed, Elias heard them, sometimes from passing squads, sometimes from careless sergeants, sometimes from the cafeteria tables where soldiers spoke freely around men who didn't wear rank. Elias took all of it quietly, but his eyes changed, just slightly, a shift so small only a man who'd lived beside him for years could read it. Torres saw it one evening as he walked past the maintenance wing. Elias was cleaning an equipment closet, same steady hands, same patient rhythm. But his shoulders sat differently. More forward, more alert. Torres slowed. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. Elias didn't turn. "Focus on your training." "They're talking," Torres said. "They've always talked," Elias replied. "Let them." "That doesn't bother you?" Elias finally looked up. His gaze carried decades compressed into a single second. "I have seen worse things than words, son." Torres nodded, though the answer didn't settle the way it used to. He walked away, feeling the weight of two lives intersecting in ways they had sworn to keep apart. The next morning, instructors continued pressing Torres, harder now. Reeves called him out during combatives, pushed him, taunted him, tested him. "Your father ever teach you how to fight?" he asked during one drill. Torres blocked a strike, controlled his breathing. "He taught me how to stand, sir." "Not good enough," Reeves snapped. Torres didn't respond. He didn't need to. But the platoon noticed something. Restraint wasn't weakness. Not in this boy. It was discipline. Discipline learned from someone who understood the cost of breaking it. Whispers continued. Tension grew. Elias kept working. Torres kept training. But the balance was shifting, quietly, steadily, like a fault line preparing to open. And all it would take was one moment, one confrontation, for the truth neither father nor son wanted to expose to break through the surface, changing everything that followed. The wind cut across the training valley like it carried a warning. You could feel it in your teeth before the instructors even blew the whistle. That's how the day started. 2 seconds of silence, and then everything tightening around it. The platoon moved out in staggered formation toward the ridgeline, rifles slung, packs heavy, boots sinking into soft earth that hadn't fully thawed from the night. Competitive field exercise. One of those tests that revealed more than anyone wanted to admit. The kind where a recruit's instincts couldn't hide behind tidy answers or clean uniforms. Torres took point because the instructors said so, not because he asked for it. His shoulders rolled with a steady rhythm. Every step measured, breathing slow. He knew how to read terrain. He knew how to manage distance. But leadership, real leadership, required stepping forward in ways he wasn't ready for. Not when every eye watched him for the wrong reasons. The squad followed him up the ridge, whispering behind cupped hands. "He hesitates," one muttered. "Scared to screw up," another added. "No," a third voice said. "He just doesn't want attention. Wonder why." The answer was already spreading like smoke. They reached the crest and hunkered down while the instructors observed from the opposite hill, binoculars reflecting sunlight like cold coins. A simulated ambush was built into the course, and they all knew it. The trick was to see it before you were swallowed by it. Torres scanned the tree line. He saw footprints where they shouldn't be. Branches bent the wrong way. A micro-shift in bird calls. He felt the trap before it snapped. But instead of calling it out, he breathed once, twice, and signaled the squad to halt. Softly. Too softly. 3 recruits missed the gesture entirely. They walked forward, triggering the first volley of blanks from the hidden instructors. Noise tore through the valley. Bodies hit the dirt. "Torres!" one shouted. "Say something." He did, but 2 seconds too late. The instructors stormed out of concealment, smoke drifting from their rifles, faces twisted in disappointment. Captain Reeves arrived last, hands behind his back, jaw clenched like he was grinding down a blade he meant to use later. "That was pathetic," Reeves said. "Who's leading this parade of confusion?" Torres stepped forward. "I am, sir." "You?" Reeves lowered his head, almost laughing. "You saw signs. I know you did. You hesitated. You let your team walk into fire." Torres held his stare. "I misjudged timing, sir." "No," Reeves shot back. "You misjudged yourself." A few recruits shifted uneasily. Others hid their smirks. Reeves circled him slowly. "Let me guess. Hard to lead when half the platoon thinks your father's waiting outside the gate with a mop and a garbage bag." A ripple of laughter moved through the ranks. Torres didn't blink, didn't speak. His jaw tightened the way metal does under pressure. Silently, without giving way, Reeves stepped closer. "Tell me, Torres, does Daddy give you leadership tips while he scrubs toilets?" More laughter, louder this time, enough that it bounced off the ridgeline. Torres kept breathing, 1 second in, 1 second out. Reeves studied him, waiting for a crack. Nothing came. That only made him angrier. "Reset the course," Reeves barked. Maybe next time Torres will find his voice, assuming his father didn't sweep it up. The platoon dispersed. Boots thudded back toward the valley floor, but the humiliation lingered like the echo of gunfire trapped in low clouds. As they regrouped for another run, 2 teammates confronted Torres quietly. "Why, didn't you call the ambush earlier?" one asked. Torres didn't answer. "You saw it. You always see things. So why freeze?" Torres closed his eyes briefly. "I didn't freeze." "Then what?" He adjusted his pack. "Doesn't matter." But it did. And they felt it. They repeated the course. Torres corrected his earlier silence, calling the ambush before it emerged. The squad performed better. Not perfect, but better. Enough to pass. Even then, Reeves wasn't satisfied. At chow, he called Torres out again. "Next time you lead," he said, "speak before the enemy does, unless you're planning on cleaning floors like your father when you wash out." A few recruits laughed into their trays. Torres sat down, silent as stone. Word traveled faster than steam rising from the food line. By evening, the entire base had heard Reeves's remark. Some found it funny, some didn't, but everyone repeated it. And Elias heard it too. He was sweeping the bleachers beside the athletic field as 2 young sergeants walked by, swapping stories from the day. "One of the kids froze on the ridge," one said. "Torres?" "Yeah. Captain tore him apart." "I heard it was because of his father. Old guy working maintenance. Poor man looked like he hadn't had a real meal in days." The other snorted. "If my dad looked like that, I wouldn't show my face either." Elias stopped sweeping, but only for a heartbeat. A pause the length of a single breath. Small enough no one would notice. Then he resumed. Dust gathered around the broom. The bristles whispered across concrete. His movements stayed steady, but the stillness inside him shifted, like someone closing a door quietly in a dark house. The sergeants walked on without a second glance. Their laughter faded into the smell of cut grass and jet fuel drifting from the runway beyond the buildings. Later that night, Torres returned to the barracks exhausted, muscles trembling, knees sore. Not from physical training, from restraint. There are days when holding the line takes more out of a soldier than any march or rifle drill. He lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling, replaying Reeves's words. Not the insult, that was meaningless, but the way it made the platoon look at him afterward, as if hesitation were a family trait, as if discipline were some fragile shell he used to hide shame. He heard laughter from across the room, quiet, muffled under blankets, recruits whispering again, poor kid. Betty hates going home. Dad probably smells like bleach and lost dreams. A few chuckles followed. Torres rolled to his side and faced the wall. He breathed slowly, evenly, the way his father taught him when he was small. Control the breath, control the body, control the reaction. It was the foundation of every lesson Elias ever gave him. The barracks quieted eventually. One by one, voices faded into sleep. Across the base, Elias finished his shift alone. He folded his cloth with precision, hung the broom on its hook, and locked the maintenance closet. Before leaving, he paused in the empty hallway, sensing something in the air. Tension. The kind that soldiers recognize long before civilians do. He stepped outside, letting the night breeze wash over him. The moon hung low, casting pale light over the buildings, the fields, the barracks where his son slept. Elias had lived in shadows before, in jungles and deserts and cold mountain passes. He knew what pressure sounded like, what it felt like beneath your skin. He knew when something was approaching, something neither welcomed nor avoidable. But this time, the threat wasn't foreign. It wasn't on a map. It wasn't wearing an enemy's uniform. It was woven into whispers, into careless laughter, into a captain's arrogance, into a son's silence. The next morning, the instructors pushed harder. Field medic drills, forced marches, blindfolded navigation. Reeves singled Torres out at every stage. Too slow, too quiet. Maybe leadership skips your generation. Each comment was loud enough for recruits to hear, soft enough to pass for instruction. By midday, they reached the obstacle course again. Ropes dripping from last night's rain, steel frames glistening. Recruits dragged themselves up walls, over beams, across the rope bridge that swayed above a shallow mud pit. Torres crossed faster than most. Not the fastest, but clean and controlled. Still, Reeves had something to say. He gestured to Torres's boots. Shame your father can't afford a better pair. Maybe if he worked harder. Laughter erupted. Even a few instructors cracked smiles. Torres looked at Reeves with a composure that didn't belong to someone his age. With respect, sir, he said quietly. Leave him out of this. Reeves leaned in. Why? Embarrassed? Torres held still. No, sir. Reeves scoffed. Then stand straighter when you defend him. Torres obeyed. The moment passed, but something broke under it. A thin, invisible barrier that had separated mockery from danger. Reeves didn't see it. The recruits didn't see it. But Elias would have. And Elias did see it, from afar. He was sweeping near the bleachers again, watching the training field as if he were just passing by. His posture unchanged, his expression unreadable. But his eyes tracked every movement, every word carried on the wind, every shift in his son's stance. When Reeves mocked Torres again, Elias paused mid-sweep. A small pause. Barely a second. Then he resumed. The broom moved, the dust rose. But inside him, something old stirred, a part of himself he had buried under quiet work and worn-out coats. By late afternoon, the air on base felt different. You could sense friction before anyone spoke of it. Instructors snapped quicker. Recruits watched their words. Even the flight line crews across the runway moved with tighter shoulders as if reading an atmospheric change they couldn't explain. The platoon settled into evening drills. Fatigue runs around the perimeter fence. Torres kept pace, steady breath, focused stride. Recruits beside him whispered again. He's breaking. No, he's boiling. He better do something soon. Torres didn't answer. He ran. Night fell hard. The base lights flickered on. The air cooled. Elias walked home across the quiet corridor behind the hangars. He passed two sergeants again, the same men from before. One nudged the other. There he is, the legend himself, king of the mop. The other laughed. Bet his kid hates calling him Dad. Elias didn't turn, didn't slow, but the silence he carried sharpened. Not anger, not hurt, something deeper, something carved by years of holding back storms that would crush lesser men. He reached the edge of the corridor and stopped. Not visibly, not dramatically, just a fractional hesitation, like a soldier assessing a battlefield he'd hoped never to walk again. Somewhere deeper inside the base, an alarm chirped once. Just once. A prelude. Elias lifted his head. The sergeants didn't notice. They walked on laughing. But Elias heard something in that single chirp, something that didn't match routine, something that didn't belong to drills or schedules or nightly security sweeps. It was faint, but it was enough. A shift ran through him like old instincts waking up, stretching after years of sleep. The breaking point was coming. And when it arrived, neither the sun, nor the platoon, nor Captain Reeves would be ready for the man they thought they knew. The security breach was only minutes away. The first alarm didn't sound like an alarm at all. It was a single metallic chirp, sharp enough to cut through conversation, soft enough to be mistaken for equipment settling in the cold. But every soldier knows the difference between routine noise and something out of place. Even the young ones felt the shift in the air. Heads turned, footsteps slowed, and deep inside the training compound, lights flickered once, like the base took a breath it wasn't supposed to take. The recruits were already lined up for the night infiltration drill. Face paint, dummy rifles, breath turning white in the dark. Instructors paced behind them, whispering to each other, arguing over terrain routes and failure predictions. No one expected trouble. These drills were designed to push limits, not break them, but complications don't wait for permission. The second alarm arrived like a hammer, a high-pitched wail that split the silence and made even the instructors flinch. Floodlights snapped off. The compound drowned in black. Radios sputtered with static. The ground itself felt different, tense, alert, listening. In the confusion, a sergeant shouted, "Maintain formation!" Another barked, "This is part of the drill. Hold positions." But the tone didn't match the words. Soldiers hear what leaders try to hide, and these leaders were hiding the truth badly. Someone asked, "Is this real?" No one answered. The recruits scattered toward the tree line as ordered, though half didn't know whether they were escaping danger or running deeper into an exercise that had already gone wrong. Metal slammed somewhere. Maybe a gate, maybe a weapon rack. A generator coughed and died. The base fell into a kind of darkness that soldiers recognize from deployment, not from training. Torres moved with the group at first, instincts guiding him when commands failed. His boots found solid ground like he'd memorized the terrain, though he'd only trained here a week. The platoon stumbled around him, tripping over roots, colliding in panic. Then he saw a figure by the fence line. Older, still, distinct against the chaos, as if the night itself avoided him. Elias. He stood near a maintenance access panel, one hand resting lightly on the metal surface, the other shielding his eyes from the dark as if he were measuring the distance between problems, not reacting, calculating. Torres stopped cold. A recruit shoved him from behind. "Move! What are you doing?" But Torres couldn't move, not for a few breaths. Elias should have been nowhere near this drill. He should have been in the lower wing sweeping corridors like he did every night. But he was here, moving with certainty through blackout conditions that left trained soldiers stumbling. Elias, crouched by the access panel, pried it open with 2 fingers and exposed wires and switches that recruits weren't supposed to see. Sparks hissed. The alarm stuttered. He muttered something under his breath. Too low for words, but the rhythm sounded like an old habit returning. Another group of recruits rushed past, shouting to instructors who weren't answering their radios. One tripped and fell hard. Before he could even curse, Elias was beside him, pulling him upright with a grip that looked gentle but lifted the boy like he weighed nothing. "Stay low," Elias said. "Follow the wall. Don't break lines." The recruit blinked. Who are you?" Elias didn't answer. He just guided him toward cover with a firm tap on the shoulder. The boy obeyed instantly. Torres watched all of it with a breath caught halfway in his chest. The way Elias moved, the way he assessed danger, the way he controlled a situation without raising his voice or revealing a hint of panic. It wasn't janitor behavior. It wasn't maintenance procedure. It was tactical instinct, pure and undeniable. The kind that comes from years of doing this in places where alarms aren't drills and darkness doesn't let you make mistakes. A shout cracked through the air. "Security panel malfunctioning. Reeves, do you copy?" Static. Another voice. "Lines are dead. I can't get through." Torres's pulse kicked harder, but Elias didn't hesitate. He reached inside the access box, manipulated a series of breakers, and bypassed the faulty circuit with movements so clean it looked like muscle memory. The panel sputtered, lights blinked along the perimeter fence, and for a moment the alarm paused. Just long enough for orientation to return. Recruits took advantage, diving behind concrete barriers and ducking low under the flickering lights. Instructors yelled to reorganize units, but they were yelling words into a storm. Most of it didn't reach the right ears. Then Captain Reeves appeared through the dark, flashlight beam slicing across panicked faces. His voice was harsh, strained. "Everyone to staging. Move!" His beam caught Elias for half a second, long enough to freeze mid-step. Reeves lowered the flashlight, studied the silhouette, watched the old man bypass a second subsystem with efficiency that didn't belong to a man with a broom. Reeves whispered, "No, that's not possible." Elias finished his work, closed the panel quietly, and gestured to the nearest cluster of recruits to move toward safer ground. 3 of them followed without thinking, drawn to the stability in his movements. The alarm resumed, but softer, controlled, no longer the frantic screech it had been. Reeves stared at Elias like he was looking at a ghost he once knew well. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. Elias didn't face him. "Learn what?" "Those movements, that pattern." Reeves stepped closer. "That's doctrine from—" But another alert cut him off, louder from deeper in the compound. Reeves cursed and sprinted toward the command post, leaving Elias alone in the half-light. The chaos tapered off as backup systems came online. Emergency lights flickered across training grounds. Instructors re-established control, herding recruits back toward the main yard, counting heads with shaking hands. No casualties, no intruder. Just a malfunction compounded by human fear. But no one forgot the old man by the fence. Recruits whispered as they regrouped. "Did you see him?" "That janitor wasn't scared at all. He fixed the whole thing before the officers did. He moved like he'd done this before, like a lot before." The instructors heard the whispers, ignored them at first, but even seasoned soldiers know when a rumor carries weight. Torres walked through the murmurs like a man moving underwater. He replayed the image of his father in the dark, calm under pressure, precise under threat, unshaken by the confusion that rattled every trained recruit on that field. He knew those habits. They were the same ones that guided every lesson Elias taught him growing up. But Torres had never understood where those habits came from, or what they once cost. As the platoon dismissed for the night, Torres looked toward the maintenance wing. A dim bulb flickered above the doorway. Elias walked inside, shoulders heavy, steps slow now that the crisis had passed. Torres followed. The maintenance room was small. Concrete walls, metal shelves, mop buckets lined like soldiers in formation. Elias sat on an old stool, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Torres closed the door behind him. "You were there," he said. Elias didn't lift his head. "I was working." "No," Torres said quietly. "You were leading. You were handling things we weren't prepared for." Silence. Torres stepped closer. "Why did you do that?" Elias finally looked up. His eyes held the kind of distance men earn in places maps don't name. "Because soldiers were afraid," he said. "Fear is heavier than any weapon." "That's not an answer." Torres swallowed. "Where did you learn to do all that?" Elias breathed out slowly, like he'd hoped this moment would come later. Much later. "I learned in a different life." "What life?" "A life I put down for a reason." Torres shook his head. "Why hide it?" "Because rank fades," Elias said. "Uniforms fade. Stories fade. What remains is the man beneath them. And you, son, you deserve to become your own name, not mine." Torres's voice cracked, not with emotion, but with realization. "You weren't protecting yourself. You were protecting me." Elias didn't confirm it. He didn't need to. Torres sat across from him, both of them silent for a few breaths. "What were you?" Torres asked. "Who were you?" Elias wiped his palms on his worn pants. "Someone who served. Someone who made choices that cost more than medals could repay. Someone who decided that humility is worth more than legacy." Torres exhaled through his nose, steadying himself. "They're going to ask questions. After tonight, they're going to want answers." "Yes," Elias said. "Rumors travel faster than truth, and once they start, you cannot outrun them." Torres nodded, understanding what his father was preparing him for, what the next days would look like, what judgments would come. Elias rose from the stool, joints stiff but posture unbroken. "Stand tall," he said. "Not for me, for yourself. Promise me that." Torres held his gaze. "I promise." Elias placed a hand briefly on his shoulder. One heartbeat, one memory, one moment of truth between them. Then he released him. Outside, through the thin walls, recruits' voices swelled. Questions, theories, shock disguised as curiosity. The story of the old janitor had already changed shape, and by morning the entire base would demand answers Elias had never intended to give. They called everyone into the training hall before sunrise. No explanation, no formation schedule, no morning prep. Just a single order pushed through the barracks halls. "All recruits, report now." It had the tone of something heavier than discipline, something that carried its own gravity. You could feel it in how boots hit the floor, faster than usual, sharper, nerves stretched thin. Torres walked with the platoon, jaw locked, hands steady. Word had spread overnight. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. They came in full sentences. Careless confidence, half-truths tossed around like ammunition. That janitor's hiding something. Maybe he used to be military. No way, old man like that. He got lucky during the blackout. Reeves is pissed. He's going to tear him apart. Torres heard all of it. He didn't correct anyone. He didn't defend or deny. He carried the silence like a weight his father had handed him the night before. A weight he wasn't sure he could shoulder much longer. Inside the training hall, the lights hummed with that uneasy buzz they get when the voltage shifts. Reeves stood in the center, arms folded behind his back, boots planted as if he were bracing for impact. Instructors lined the walls, faces tight, unsure whether they were about to witness a disciplinary action or something else entirely. Then Elias was led inside, not escorted, not forced, just guided by a young sergeant who looked uncomfortable walking beside a man old enough to be his grandfather. Elias held no weapon, no papers, nothing but the same worn coat and quiet stare he carried every day. He walked in calm, but the room reacted like a ripple hitting still water. A few recruits snickered. Others nudged each other. One whispered, "This is gonna be good," loud enough for the row beside him to hear. Reeves stepped forward, voice sharp enough to straighten every spine in the room. "Elias," he said, "front and center." Elias obeyed without a word, stepping into the open space like he'd stood in the center of more dangerous rooms. He didn't shift his weight, didn't fidget, didn't avert his gaze. Just stood there, still and unthreatened, as if facing Reeves was the least demanding thing he'd done in years. Reeves circled him, not hiding the hostility in his eyes. "You caused quite a stir last night." Elias remained silent. "Bypassing a security panel. guiding recruits during a blackout, moving through a compound like you built it. Reeves stopped beside him. Care to explain how a janitor pulls off something like that? Elias met his stare. I reacted to a malfunction. Don't play coy with me, Reeves snapped. I know skill when I see it. What you did wasn't instinct. It was training. Still, Elias said nothing. Reeves took a breath, steadier this time. So, where did you learn those methods? Elias looked past him, not defiant, not dismissive, just done with the line of questioning. I learned many things in my life, Captain. That's not an answer. It's the only one needed. A low wave of murmurs spread through the hall. Some recruits rolled their eyes, others chuckled. One said, loud enough to cut through the air, maybe he just got lucky twice. Man's still a poor old... Torres moved before he intended to. He stepped out of formation, boots ringing against concrete. Say it again, he said, voice calm but carrying a temperature no one missed. Recruits froze. The instructors tensed. Reeves turned sharply. Torres, step back. But Torres didn't. Say it again, he repeated, looking at the recruit who'd spoken. Elias lifted a hand slightly, a subtle motion meant to stop him. But Torres didn't see it, or couldn't obey it anymore. Reeves glared at the recruit. You will hold your tongue. The young man swallowed hard but muttered, just saying what everyone knows. His father's. He didn't finish, because Elias turned. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just a simple pivot of the feet, a shift of the shoulders, a change so controlled it felt like the room had been placed under a different gravity. Silence rippled outward, swallowing laughter, freezing ridicule. Something in his posture changed, a subtle straightening of the spine, a centering of weight, a gaze that didn't belong to a man who swept floors for a living. It belonged to someone who had once commanded men who never questioned orders. Reeves felt it first. His breath caught. His eyes narrowed. He stepped closer, searching Elias's face with the urgency of a man digging through memory. Where have I seen you? Reeves murmured. Elias didn't answer. Reeves's voice lowered to a thread. That stance, those eyes, that presence. No. He shook his head once. No, it can't be. A flicker of recognition struck him like a blow. He staggered back a step. The instructors noticed. Recruits noticed. The air tightened. Reeves whispered, barely audible. You're dead. They said you were dead. Elias exhaled slowly. They said many things. Reeves looked shaken, truly shaken, for the first time since the recruits arrived on base. State your name, he demanded, but his tone was no longer hostile. It was reverent, fearful, disbelieving. Elias hesitated, like he was weighing the cost of letting truth out into the room. But some truths refused to stay buried forever. He lifted his chin slightly. General Elias Aragon, former commander, Special Operations Group. The hall stopped breathing. The name hit the room like a detonation. Several recruits stepped back instinctively. Others stared at Elias with wide, disoriented eyes. One dropped his water bottle. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Reeves looked like he'd seen a ghost. Because in a way, he had. He swallowed hard. You were the Shadow Commander. Elias didn't confirm it. He didn't deny it either, but Reeves's reaction told the recruits everything they needed to know. One instructor whispered, I read about him in classified briefings, missions that don't officially exist. Another murmured, he trained the teams that trained us. The hall changed shape around Elias. Power shifted, silent but unmistakable. The old man with the broom was gone. In his place stood a figure who carried entire wars in the quiet of his posture. Reeves stepped forward again, slower this time. Why are you here? Working maintenance? Disappearing? Elias gazed at him with the calm weight of a man who had nothing left to prove. Some men serve loudly. Others serve in ways that ask for silence. You vanished, Reeves said. The reports said you died on rotation. That's what they needed to believe, Elias replied. Reeves exhaled like he'd been punched. He turned to Torres. You knew? He asked. Torres shook his head. Not fully. Not like this. Reeves looked back at Elias. You could have returned. You could have kept your rank, your legacy. Elias didn't blink. Legacy is a shadow that burdens the next man in line. My son deserves better than that. Torres swallowed hard, emotion tightening his breath in a way he hoped no one noticed. A recruit near the back spoke, voice trembling. Sir, we mocked him. We mocked you. Elias looked at him, not angry, not insulted, just steady. You mocked a man you did not know. That is the way of youth. But wisdom comes when you learn to see before you speak. Another recruit whispered, He was sweeping floors. Elias turned his head. Work does not define worth. Reeves bowed his head slightly, a gesture no one had ever seen him make to anyone. General, he said quietly, I apologize. Deeply. Elias shook his head. You owe me nothing. You trained my son. You hardened him. That was enough. But Reeves wasn't finished. He looked at Torres. You carry his blood, Reeves said, but you walk your own path now. Understand this. No one here will ever look at you the same. Torres didn't know whether that felt like freedom or pressure. Maybe both. Reeves faced the room. Listen well. The man standing before you commanded units so elite most of you only know their names whispered in documentaries. He led missions that shaped entire regions. Men followed him into places where the air itself turned hostile. Recruits stared at Elias with a mix of fear and awe. And he, Reeves continued, has been walking among us, sweeping floors, cleaning hallways, watching us judge him without knowing a fraction of who he is. No one dared speak. Elias stepped forward, voice steady. Respect does not come from fear. It comes from understanding. A soldier learns this last. He looked at Torres, then back at the room. I chose silence because my name once weighed too much. I will not let it weigh on my son. Torres felt something shift inside him, a fracture giving way to clarity. His father had not hidden out of shame. He had hidden out of love. Reeves bowed his head again. General Aragon, what are your orders? Elias's answer landed with the force of quiet truth. I am retired, Captain. My only order now is simple. Teach them better than the world taught me. The room remained frozen for several breaths. Then Elias turned and walked out. No escort this time, no uncertainty in his steps. Just a man reclaiming nothing, explaining nothing, carrying nothing but his own history. The recruits parted silently to let him pass. And Torres watched him go, understanding, fully, painfully, proudly, what it meant to live in the shadow of a man who chose humility over glory. The truth had been exposed, and now father and son would have to face the cost of stepping out of silence together. They treated him differently the next morning. Not with fear, not with awe, just with the quiet caution men use when they realize they've been speaking too loudly about something they never understood. Conversations halted when Torres entered the room. Eyes stayed on him longer. Even the ones who mocked him 2 days earlier straightened their posture, as if good posture could erase what they'd said. Torres felt all of it, the shift in air pressure around him. Respect isn't silent. It has a sound. It's softer than mockery, steadier than praise. It moves like a current beneath words. He didn't bask in it. He didn't recoil either. He simply stood in it, letting the new expectation settle on his shoulders like a ruck he'd trained years to carry. Form up, an instructor barked, and the platoon snapped into line. Except this time, when Torres took a position near the center, No one questioned it. No one looked for someone else to lead the warm-up cadence. A recruit to his left murmured, "You call it, Torres." That was all. A simple invitation. Not because of his father, because last night had shown them who he was when chaos stripped everything else away. Torres inhaled once and called the cadence. Steady, clean, controlled. The platoon fell into rhythm behind him, boots hitting ground as one. The morning air vibrated with a unity they hadn't touched before. Reeves watched from the sideline, arms folded, expression unreadable. There was no arrogance now, no mocking smile. The man looked older than he had days earlier, as if truth had carved something out of him. And maybe it had. Realization can age a person fast. After drills, Reeves approached Torres. "Walk with me," he said quietly. They moved toward the edge of the training field where the grass faded into gravel. No one followed. Soldiers know when a conversation isn't meant for extra ears. Reeves kept his hands behind his back. "You showed restraint," he said, "more than I deserved." Torres looked straight ahead. "My job is to train, sir." "Your job," Reeves corrected, "is to lead, and you're beginning to understand that." A slow breath left Torres's chest. "I'm still learning." "We all are," Reeves said. Then, after a long beat, "I owe your father an apology." Torres didn't respond. He didn't need to. Reeves continued. "I humiliated a man whose operations shape the doctrine I teach. A man I once studied like a ghost story. And he stood there yesterday, allowing it, all of it." "He didn't want attention," Torres said. "No," Reeves replied softly. "He wanted you to stand on your own." The words hit deeper than Reeves knew. Across the yard, Elias swept dust from the stands with the same quiet patience he'd shown since the day Torres arrived. His posture hadn't changed. His expression hadn't hardened. If anything, he looked lighter, as if the truth had removed a weight he'd carried longer than he intended. Reeves's eyes rested on him. "I offered him reinstatement," he said. "Administrative rank, honorary command." "What did he say?" Reeves exhaled. "He said titles outlive usefulness. Character doesn't." Torres almost smiled. Almost. That was exactly the kind of answer he expected from Elias. The day's main training exercise came after noon chow, a complex team assault simulation spanning the ruined village model at the far end of the compound. Multiple buildings, blind corners, elevated positions. The kind of environment that punished hesitation and rewarded synchronized instinct. Instructors broke the platoon into fire teams. Torres's team waited near the start point, rifles slung, helmets clipped, boots planted. His teammates watched him with something close to anticipation. "You ready to call it?" one asked. Torres took a slow breath through his nose. "Yeah," he said. "This time, I am." The whistle blew. They moved out. Torres scanned quickly, left rooftops, broken windows, doorways half ajar. He called hand signals with confidence, moving his team like a single instrument. He placed a spotter high, split two shooters to the flank, and angled his own advance where visibility was best. No hesitation. No second-guessing. He spoke only when necessary. "Clear the stack. Watch that corner. Push through." His team listened without question. Gunfire blanks cracked in the air, echoing through wooden walls. Instructors played opposing forces, hitting angles recruits often missed. But Torres adjusted each time, reshaping the formation, shifting pressure, opening routes others overlooked. In one moment, a recruit hesitated at a dark doorway. Torres stepped beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "On my count," he whispered. "You take high, I take low." The recruit nodded. 1, 2, 3. They breached together, smooth and controlled. By the end of the exercise, Torres's team hit every objective, cleared every building, and extracted without a single simulated casualty. It was the first top evaluation the platoon had seen since the cycle began. Recruits pumped fists and clapped each other's backs. Instructors exchanged surprised looks. Reeves nodded once, approving, solemn. But Torres didn't look toward them first. He looked toward the stands. Elias was there, halfway up the bleachers, leaning on the broom handle. Watching. No smile, just a steady gaze, soft around the edges in a way Torres hadn't seen in years. Elias gave a small nod. Torres returned it. That was enough. More than any praise, more than any evaluation sheet. Over the next week, something subtle spread across the base. Not spoken policy, not official recognition, just a shift in how people behaved. Recruits held doors for Elias. Instructors greeted him with brief, respectful nods. Even the young sergeants who once mocked him lowered their voices when he passed, not out of fear, but understanding. He didn't stand taller. He didn't accept privileges. He finished his work quietly, sweeping halls and polishing floors with the same discipline he once demanded from men carrying rifles in the dead of night. When Reeves approached him one morning, Elias paused his sweeping. "General Aragon," Reeves began. "Elias," he corrected gently. Reeves nodded. "Elias, I want to say this plainly. I wronged you." Elias studied him. "The world will wrong you sometimes, Captain. What matters is how you stand after." Reeves swallowed. "I should have stood better." Elias rested both hands on the broom. "Then do so now." Reeves straightened. "Yes, sir." The exchange lasted seconds, but the echo lingered long after. Meanwhile, Torres continued rising. Not because people now expected him to, not because his father's name suddenly carried weight, but because something inside him had shifted, an anchor lifted, a shadow removed. He trained harder, led more clearly, spoke when it mattered. The platoon followed without hesitation. One evening, after a long endurance march, Torres found Elias waiting outside the barracks. The old man wasn't sweeping. He wasn't pretending to pass by. He stood with his hands folded behind his back, like he once did while overseeing units preparing for deployment. "You're leading now," Elias said. Torres wiped sweat from his brow. "Trying to." "You're doing more than trying." Torres looked down. "I didn't want your name to change how they see me." "It won't," Elias said. "Your actions already did." They stood in a silence that wasn't heavy this time, just shared. Elias glanced toward the dim sky. "Training ends soon." "I know." "Then finish it well," Elias said. "Finish it as yourself." Torres nodded. As they parted, Torres noticed the faintest shift in his father's step. Not pride, not relief, something quieter, something like peace. The days that followed were steady, disciplined, almost calm compared to everything before. The base moved with new awareness, a new respect woven into its routines, a new understanding of the man sweeping floors and the sun rising to command. But training cycles end, and endings demand a final moment. And when this one came, it carried the weight of everything said and unsaid, ready to seal a legacy neither father nor son had planned to reveal. Graduation morning came quiet, the kind of quiet that settles over a place after weeks of noise. The flags barely moved. The air felt still enough to hold a thought steady. And in that stillness, the recruits, now soldiers, stood in formation, boots aligned, uniforms crisp, the weight of everything they'd endured resting cleanly on their shoulders. Torres stood in the second row. Not at the front, he hadn't asked for that, but centered, as if the formation had naturally shaped itself around him. His gaze stayed forward, steady, unblinking. A man ready to step into whatever the world asked of him next. In the back, half-shadowed by the bleachers, Elias stood with his hands folded behind him. No fanfare. No special chair. Just a quiet presence blending into the morning like he belonged more to the air than the ceremony. Most didn't notice him. Some who did looked twice, unsure whether they should salute. He spared them the confusion by looking at the ground, giving them a reason to pretend they hadn't seen him. A colonel stepped onto the podium and addressed the graduates. His words carried the usual weight: duty, sacrifice, commitment to country. But the men listening weren't boys anymore. Their faces didn't brighten with pride, they sharpened with understanding. Training doesn't build greatness, it uncovers it. And the past weeks had unearthed more truth than any of them expected. Then came the commendations. One by one, names were called. Applause rose and fell in timed waves. When Torres's name echoed across the yard, a shift moved through the ranks. Small, respectful, real. He stepped forward, saluted, and accepted the citation for leadership with a calm that didn't exist in him on the first day. As he turned back toward formation, he let his eyes drift, just for a moment, toward the man standing alone at the back. Elias didn't smile, didn't nod, but his posture softened, and the stillness around him changed shape. Anyone who'd lived long enough would recognize that for what it was: pride held quietly, the kind that doesn't need words. After dismissal, families rushed the field. The noise returned: laughter, greetings, relieved shouts. Instructors shook hands. Recruits embraced each other like brothers forged under fire. Torres moved through it all until he spotted Elias near the exit gate, waiting as if he'd been part of the ceremony and apart from it all at once. But before Torres reached him, a young recruit intercepted Elias. The kid couldn't have been older than 19. Sweat still clung to his collar. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of something he needed to say. "Sir," he began, voice low, I wanted to apologize for the things I said before I knew. I was out of line." Elias studied him, not judging, not dismissing, just seeing him clearly. "What is your name, son?" "Reed, sir." Elias rested a weathered hand on the young man's shoulder. "Reed, a soldier isn't measured by what he says in ignorance, only by how he stands once he learns better." Reed's breath shook as he nodded. "Yes, sir." Elias squeezed his shoulder once, a gesture of acceptance, then released him. The kid walked off lighter than he came. Torres approached then, boots slow, deliberate. He stopped beside his father, hands resting at his sides. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence between them had changed. It no longer carried tension or concealed truths. It carried understanding. Mutual. Earned. "You did well," Elias finally said. Torres shook his head once. "I did my best." "That's what I meant." They turned toward the main gate as the crowd thinned behind them. The sun sat low, throwing long shadows across the concrete. Their silhouettes stretched side by side, not overlapping, not competing. Two different stories, walking in the same direction for the first time in years. A passing officer slowed as if deciding whether to address Elias, but the old man dipped his chin in a quiet dismissal, keeping his anonymity intact. The officer understood and moved on. Elias hadn't reclaimed glory. He hadn't taken back rank. He returned to silence because silence was where he'd chosen to live. Greatness doesn't always need a platform. Sometimes it just needs room to breathe. At the gate, Torres paused. "They'll talk about you," he said. "They talk too much already," Elias replied. "And about me," Torres added. Elias looked at him. Really looked. "Let them. Your path is yours now. Names carry weight, but only you decide how to bear it." Torres nodded. The truth settled into him cleanly, like a final piece locking into place. They stepped through the gate together, the noise of the ceremony fading behind them. The future stretched open ahead. No medals clattered, no salutes echoed in their wake. Just two men walking under a quiet sky, one returning to obscurity by choice, the other stepping into the world with a steady stride and a clearer name. the wind shifted, carrying the last soft echoes of graduation day away. And the story closed on a simple truth that every soldier eventually learns. Greatness isn't always visible. Sometimes it sweeps the floors beside you,